All right. So I will welcome everyone to another Workshop Wednesday. I'm Jen Slatter at the League of Cities and Towns, and I'm thankful to have our colleagues from Power Options here to discuss some options regarding power and many, many other services that they are kind enough to help us provide here at the League. So, Kristen, should I turn it over to you
Yeah,
and
I'll kick
to
us
kick us
off.
off? Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, thanks everybody for joining. I know that there's a lot happening in your communities with the snow, and so we're grateful for you're here, and hopefully for those of you that wanted to be here but couldn't because you're being pulled away to other responsibilities. This is being recorded, so you're hearing us at some future date. But we really wanted to come and talk to folks about energy affordability because you're hearing about it all over the place. It's very much in the news. It's also, I know, a part of the conversation in the state with the governor's budget. So, and you're feeling it as you're seeing your energy bills coming in. So, before we get into that, excuse me, 'tis the season of colds. I succumbed, but wanted to just remind you all that by the benefit of being members of the Rhode Island League for Cities and Towns, that you are also a member of Power Options through the REAP program, the Rhode Island Energy Aggregation Program. So in addition to talking about energy affordability, we want to make sure that you're aware of all of the benefits that come with that and all the different ways that we have available to you. And as an organization that's been working with municipalities for over 25 years, um, we're well versed in your needs and really want to make sure that you're getting what you need to navigate this complex energy environment. And I'm going to pass it over to Zach, who's going to kick us off and really kind of delve into these issues of energy affordability. For those of you who are here, if you have questions along the way, please raise them because we want this to be conversational and these are kind of rich, complex topics. So if something's not clear, just let us know. We're happy to address it. So, Zach.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. And let me pull up the PowerPoint here. Can everybody see that all right? Yes, perfect. Okay. So yeah, I wanted to go through, we hear a lot about energy affordability and energy is very complex. So I wanted to go through, what are the things that are driving increased energy costs and what are the things that you as cities and towns can do to help like grapple with that volatility and that uncertainty that we're seeing a lot in the energy industry right now. So to orient ourselves here, when we look at electricity and natural gas supply, there are two major components. There is delivery and supply for both of them. Delivery is the cost that always comes from your utility, which is Rhode Island Energy in all of your cases. And it's kind of the cost to maintain like the poles and wires and the infrastructure for electricity or for natural gas, the pipelines. There's also some regulatory components that are put in there as well, but largely, the utility specific costs. Supply costs, on the other hand, are the costs for the physical electrons of energy or molecules of natural gas that you are consuming. And so looking at delivery costs, those are costs that you generally can't control because those are kind of set in stone and they are what they are. It's almost like my experience I've had with kind of like internet and cable. You have one provider in the area and that's who you end up with. And so that's what delivery costs are. So I want to take a little bit of a look at what buckets these costs fall into and where they come from a little bit. So over here on the left, are all the sub bullets are all the different line items that you'll see on your Rhode Island energy bill. And so I've kind of grouped them by where they come from and what they're for. So these first couple of buckets here are really, they're from the Rhode Island government and they're public benefit programs for renewable energy, energy efficiency programs, low income heat assistance programs, those sorts of items. So there's four different line items in your bill that come from that are all set and mandated by the Rhode Island state government. There's a couple of other charges for transmission, which are mandated by FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And those are for long distance electricity transportation to make sure that we can get electricity to everywhere that it needs to go. The last bucket is utility-specific charges. So these are the charges for utilities to upkeep their systems, be able to generate the bills, have analysts for you, maintain the poles and the wires and all of that utility infrastructure. And so you can see, most of these line items come from the Rhode Island government and the utility themselves, couple from the federal government. So it's kind of a spread of very local to federal and countrywide charges that everyone sees. Looking at your natural gas bill, a lot less line items here. Really only in two buckets. There's a couple charges from the Rhode Island government, again, for energy efficiency and low-income heating charges that are public benefit programs. And then there's very similar utility charges to maintain the pipeline infrastructure, be able to bill you and have account managers and analysts and all of those things to be able to service you properly. And so again, these are not necessarily costs that we can control, but these are where they come from a little bit just to have in mind. Now, if we go back to this a little bit, for supply side of things, there are a couple different components of supply for each of them. For electricity, we have the non-energy components, which are generally the regulatory components mandated by the regional grid operator, ISO New England, and those are to help keep the markets to get the energy that we need for the region to you. And then on the other side of the equation, we have the actual energy costs, which are the costs, again, for those physical electrons that you're using. For natural gas, a little bit different. We have basis, which is the cost to reserve the pipeline space to get the natural gas from where it's produced, either in like the Pennsylvania area or down in the Gulf, up to New England. And then we have the NYMEX cost, which is the actual cost for the gas molecules. And the reason they're called NYMEX is because it's a traded commodity, and so stands for New York Mercantile Exchange, because it is traded there, something that not a lot of people know. But the supply costs are where you have some pieces that you can control and do something about. So let's get into that a little bit. So in terms of your electricity bill from your supplier, what do those charges look like? So we, again, have a couple of charges from the Rhode Island state government. Big one is the Renewable Portfolio Standard, which is a mandate from the Rhode Island government for a certain amount of renewable electricity that increases over time to help green up the grid. The Rhode Island government has a goal to be net zero, and so the Renewable Portfolio Standard is their way of getting the electricity market to net zero over time. The other thing, as we all know, taxes to be able to help fund the government. Another bucket of charges is what I was saying before. ISO New England is the independent system operator of New England. They operate and oversee the regional grid for the entirety of New England. And so there's a couple of charges related to that. There's capacity charges, which are making sure that we compensate all the generation resources in the region to be here and give us electricity at all times. And then there's ancillary charges, which are kind of filling in some other niches in the market. And one thing I wanted to flag is a lot of you may be seeing some costs for a new market that we've reached out about before, and you may have seen in the news, called DAISY, or the Day Ahead Ancillary Services Initiative. That is part of these ancillary charges, and it's a new market that started about a year ago that has had significant cost. And so all of that is under resource adequacy and system planning to make sure that we have enough power for the region. We're thinking ahead for that. All the infrastructure is maintained properly, and we incentivize generators to be here and stay here. The last items are the supplier charges. One of those is line losses, which is a charge that comes up from the loss of electricity to heat as it moves over the wires over time. And that is a cost charged to the supplier by the utility for utilizing their wires. The other piece is the energy, which is that actual cost of the electrons that you use. And so looking at that, all of these, the energy piece is really the piece where you can see where you can control and do something about and see some potential cost savings. These other ones, more or less set in stone over time, but energy is really where you can take advantage. And so digging into the electricity costs a little more, just to kind of orient of like, okay, I see all these costs. How much are they really of my bill? So here, we have Constellation as our supplier for the Power Options program and subsequently for the REAP program. And so looking at a typical Constellation bill, we can see that the supply portion on the left side here is about 50% of your overall cost for electricity, whereas the utility bill is the other 50%. And so looking at that 50% supply cost, here are all those components that I just talked about on the other bill. So you can see largely the energy costs, which are the part that you can control, are greater than 50% of the bill. In the earlier years here, it's about 63%. This year, you go out a little bit in the future, prices are looking a little bit cheaper over time. The other larger piece of things is this renewable portfolio standard, which as we green up the electricity supply over time, ends up costing more and more money. And so those are really the major components. You can see line loss is very minimal, just a couple percent, but it's really the energy costs that are driving the cost of supply for your supplier's bill. Switching gears to natural gas real quick, again, much simpler than power. There are 3 line items you'll see generally. There are taxes, again, to fund government programs and government operations. And then there are supplier charges, which are those basis and NYMEX costs that I was talking about for transportation and the molecules of gas. And so the whole supplier charges in terms of natural gas for both basis and NYMEX are something that you also have control over. And so as we're looking at, what can I do and what is making things expensive, let's really look at those energy costs for electricity and the basis and NYMEX costs for natural gas. So now let's take a look a little bit at what factors are really influencing those prices that we see for energy and the other pieces of things that are in your bills. And so one thing I wanted to show is just like looking over time, how have these costs changed? And so on the left here, we have a breakdown of what a supply bill for a Rhode Island customer looked like in 2017 and for the couple years in the future, and then what it looks like today. And so you can see, first of all, that most costs were, $70 or $80 a megawatt hour back in 2017 when we were looking ahead for the next couple of years. Nowadays, we have costs that are, close to 110, approaching 120 as we get out to 2029 dollars per megawatt hour. So there's been a significant increase in there. And why is that? So a big thing you can see in terms of decrease is the cost of capacity. The cost to keep generators in the region has gone down over time as we've improved our capacity market and gotten more sure resources with better designed markets in place. So that is a plus. On the flip side, we've seen pretty much everything else increase its share of your bill. So energy is significant, again, a significant expense here. We're looking at 50% plus now. It was about that percent earlier, but that was only costing you a little under $40 a megawatt hour. Nowadays, it's $60+ a megawatt hour, so about 1.5 times as expensive as it was back in 2017. Additionally, the renewable portfolio standard, as we're greening up the grid more and more, and a larger percentage of the electricity supply has to be from green energy, that is costing more and more for the suppliers to provide. And so that is ending up with a larger share. It was only a couple dollars per megawatt hour. Now it's getting towards $20 a megawatt hour as a portion of your bill. Ancillaries have also increased a little bit, with the proliferation of renewables. There are different markets and pieces that the ISO has to put in there to make sure the grid is operating at all times properly. And so those costs have increased, especially over the last years we've seen from that DAISY market that I had mentioned earlier. One thing I also wanted to mention is why does everyone get different pricing? If you've ever gotten pricing from a supplier, you can see that different suppliers will have different pricing. And if you look at individual accounts of yours, they all end up with different pricing. And they're all relatively in the same geographic area, but you might be wondering, why is that? Why do I get a different price if I talk to this town or this business? Why do we all have different prices for supply? And there's a lot of reasons for that. So if we look at natural gas, there's a couple main things that the natural gas supplier has to take into account when they are calculating the cost to serve you. And so one of those is what's called a utility capacity assignment. And that is effectively how much reserved space you have on the pipeline. Most accounts will have a capacity assignment given to them that allows them to receive a certain amount of gas in the pipeline system. And that is done so that the utility can make sure that they have the right amount of pipeline to service all of the customers that they are promising can get a certain amount of natural gas. So once you take all that together, you get the total pipeline capacity for every single account of every single customer they serve. And so all of your accounts will have a capacity assignment. And so different capacity assignments can mean different prices. If you have a capacity assignment that is higher than the actual amount of natural gas that you use, that can be a benefit a lot of the time, and it can make your cost to serve you, the basis price, a little bit cheaper. If it's kind of the flip side and you end up needing a little more natural gas than you use, or you're right at what that capacity assignment is, that can make it a little more expensive to serve. Another thing is the utility rate class. There are a couple different rate classes depending on the size of the account and how much you use. And so that can change how much it costs to serve you as well. Your usage profile, kind of how your usage changes throughout the year. As I'm sure we're all well aware, especially these past couple of weeks here, when it's really cold, everyone has their heat on. And so natural gas is at a bit of a premium in the pipeline system because everyone's trying to use it to heat. We have businesses heating, homes heating. We're also using a lot of it to generate electricity in the region. And so if you use a substantial amount of your gas during the winter when prices are more expensive because there is higher demand, that will really weight your price more to those expensive months and make it higher. If your profile is pretty consistent over the year, or if you happen to use more during the summer, that can make your price a little cheaper. But how you use your natural gas does affect the price a lot. Your geographical location, kind of where you're located in relation to pipelines. We have major pipelines that will feed into the utilities pipeline systems. And so if you're way down the end of a pipeline, that might make the cost to serve you a little more expensive because they have to keep the pressure up in the pipeline and deliver enough gas to you to keep that pressure up in order to get it over to you. And if they don't, it wouldn't get to you. And so the cost to make sure that that happens is somewhat expensive. And then the other thing is the contract timing. When your contract is signed, how long it is for, how many months or years you're signing it for can also impact the way that that is calculated. For electricity, a lot of similar items. In electricity world, we have this thing called the capacity tag, which is your account's demand during the annual hour of the highest demand on the entire New England grid. And that is where those capacity costs that we talked about at a previous slide come from, is this capacity tag. So everyone kind of pays their share of the total need for the system at the most grid stressed day. And so the capacity tag will affect your pricing. If you have a higher capacity tag, you'll pay more capacity cost. And if you have a lower or a zero tag from utilizing some programs like batteries or solar or things like that, your costs are much cheaper. Your monthly demand can also impact your bill. There are some charges that are billed volumetrically in terms of the total number of kilowatt hours you use for the month. And there are some that are billed based on your highest demand during the month per kilowatt. And so if your demand is higher, you're going to pay more money for those charges because they're a fixed rate per kilowatt. If you use less, you're going to pay less for those costs. Again, your usage profile for electricity. The most demand is during the summer, but again, as I had stated earlier, since we use natural gas to generate the vast majority of the electricity in this region, electricity costs are also more expensive during the winter. And so if you use a lot of electricity during the winter and not necessarily the summer or the fall or the spring, that can make your price more expensive. So taking that into account is also important. Again, geographical location can affect it if you're way down the end of the wires. Maintaining those wires and whatnot can cost a little more. And then again, the contract timing, when it's signed and for how many months or years you sign it for. Since each account's factors for all of these will be different, that is why each account gets different pricing. Because it is, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it is highly rare or unlikely that an account will be the same rate code with the exact same usage profile for every month, with the exact same demand and all of that. I'd be really impressed if we found two that were exactly the same. But that is unlikely. So that is why every single account and every single grouping of accounts all gets a different price because these factors all have to be put together to get a single price for you. Now looking at some of sort of the other non-market factors that we're seeing that are impacting pricing, one of them I wanted to point out is the 2021 Rhode Island Act on Climate Change. So this act updated the 2014 Resilient Rhode Island Act and established enforceable climate emissions reduction mandates through what they call the Executive Climate Change Coordinating Council, or EC4. And so they mandated targets of total greenhouse gas emissions from a 1990 benchmark in Rhode Island They wanted a 45% reduction by 2030, an 80% reduction by 2040, and 100% reduction or net zero by 2050. And so to help do that, they set a goal for 100% of the electricity sold to folks in Rhode Island to come from 100% renewable sources by 2033. And so that's where that renewable portfolio standard that I was talking about earlier comes into play, is exactly this. This is their way of doing it in the electricity sector, is by adding that renewable portfolio standard piece on there. And some suppliers are able to have contracts with actual renewables, some solar fields or maybe some wind farms or things like that. But the way that a lot of them will do it is by buying renewable energy credits. And so the cost for those renewable energy credits, as we need more and more of them, is likely to go up. And so that is why over time that cost is increasing, because they have to buy more and more of them every year that they are serving you. As we were talking about a little bit earlier here, Governor McKee's proposed FY27 budget has a lot of different things in it that are aimed to address, energy affordability through a bunch of different levers, such as delaying that 100% renewable electricity target that I was just talking about from 2033 to 2050 to try and spread out those costs, enabling nuclear and large hydroelectric to help contribute to those renewable energy targets, because they're not currently set as a renewable classified resource that is eligible. Capping the energy efficiency program budget so that folks are not paying too much for it on their bills. Freezing the value of the net metering credits from net metering programs effective to July 1st of this year. Adding a grid access fee for new projects for net metering that are over a megawatt that are added to the grid to help pay for costs for upgrading transmission stations or things like that. Transitioning net metering credits to a wholesale rate as of 2045, which was previously pushed out to 2060, or currently is, I should say, and then leveraging 50% of ACP funds as immediate rate relief. So there's a lot in that bill that the governor is looking to use to try and address the affordability. It's unclear what will be passed, what won't. There's a lot of discussions going on with those. Some of them may provide some marginal near-term relief, but there are concerns about long-term impacts of some of these changes. So unclear how that will move forward at this point in time, but just wanted to flag that this is something that's being discussed at the state government level with a lot of different pieces of this. Some additional legislation that we've seen in the state, there's a couple active and a couple proposed pieces. So one active piece of legislation is something called the Renewable Energy Growth Program Amendments, which gives residential solar owners performance-based incentives of about 32 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity generated and sold to the grid. So if you happen to have a residential account and you have solar on there and you sell it back to the grid, they give you a little more money to help make the cost of putting on that solar array much easier to bear and the payback period decreased. There's also a property tax stabilization that was put in place that sets a flat tangible property tax rate of $5 per kilowatt AC for any renewable energy resources that are installed within the state of Rhode Island, which should help with, again, the payback period and resource folks who want to develop them, shoring that up. A couple proposed pieces of legislation that can help with this, the budget, as we just discussed, and there's also something called the Solar Cost Reduction Act, which the state is looking to automate the solar permitting process that can help reduce overhead costs instead of having someone to spend a bunch of time filling out permits and going back and forth with the proper department at the state government and whatnot. They want to automate it just to make it really quick and reduce the amount of man hours that are needed to get permits for these projects. So those are some things in Rhode Island that are specifically being done. Moving over to energy markets, a lot of factors there as well. One thing I wanted to flag, like I was saying before, natural gas really drives the price of electricity in the region. And so if you look at this chart, the blue line is the daily cost of natural gas throughout the region since the beginning of 2021. And the green line is the cost of electricity every single day over the past couple of years. And you can see, while not at the same magnitude, they are very correlated in terms of if natural gas prices go up, so do power prices. And the thing I wanted to flag these days is if you look at this, the right side of this graph here, recent pricing has been significantly higher for this winter than we've seen over the past few years, and frankly, ever. These prices for this day, it was January 26th, were the highest single day natural gas and electricity prices we have ever seen in New England. Natural gas prices for that day were about $174 per decatherm, and electricity prices were about $650 per megawatt hour. So hugely expensive for that day. That was after that really big blizzard that we had that kind of swept across most of the nation. And even just earlier in the winter, when we saw kind of late November, early December, when we had some deep cold as well, prices spiked pretty high, higher than we've seen since 2022, which was a historically high year for energy prices. And so we're starting to see a lot more volatile weather that is causing spikes in pricing, especially over this past year. So those dynamics are starting to drive up prices because, as we've seen with this event, that costs a lot. And so if we're going to see more and more of that over time, over the next few years, that means the cost to serve is going to be more expensive. Another thing I wanted to touch on is LNG exports. LNG stands for liquefied natural gas, and it's how we can export and move natural gas around the world, not through pipelines. And so what has happened since kind of the mid 2010s is the US, when we started doing fracking, we were able to get a lot more natural gas out of the ground than we had before. And so at a certain point, we turned from importing this liquefied natural gas to help meet our needs to having so much excess that we started exporting the natural gas. And so that really ramped up, in the early 2010s out to 2020-ish, and then it kind of plateaued for a little bit. There was a permitting freeze for new plants during the Biden administration, which is really why that plateaued for a couple of years there. Since the Trump administration, part two, has taken over, they've opened up the permitting process again, and we've seen a massive proliferation of liquefied natural gas export plants being added. Over here in gray is what is existing as of when this was made by the EIA early last year. And all the blue, orange, and yellow are plants that are planned over the next couple of years. Since then, I've heard rumblings that we might even be at a higher point where we might get up to levels of 40 billion cubic feet per day of liquefied natural gas exports. And so this has really increased substantially. Today, we sit at just over 19 billion cubic feet per day. That I checked this morning, we've reached as high as 19.8 billion cubic feet, and we're expected to surpass 20 billion cubic feet in the next month or so as a new plant opens up. This Golden Pass plant, actually, that's listed here, is likely to open over the next month. They've sent a request to FERC to allow their plant to function. And so the issue that we have is that as we're exporting more gas from the country, that means that we have less supply here domestically. And New England is already a supply constrained region. We really only have two major pipelines that come up into New England, and we're at the very end of the pipeline. And so that leads to a lot of issues in terms of pricing for us. And because we have such limited pipelines, we actually in New England have to buy liquefied natural gas tankers to come into the region. And there's a facility in Everett, Massachusetts. You might have been hearing about the New England Revolution Stadium that wants to be built in Everett. It is right next to that site, where we can import liquefied natural gas into the system. And we need to do that on the 10 to 20 coldest days of the year when natural gas is really in high demand for power and for heating. We don't have enough pipeline infrastructure for that. So we need to buy these liquefied natural gas cargoes. However, due to some federal rules, we can't buy it at the US price. We have to buy it at the global price. And so the issue with that is that here's a graph of what our price, the Henry Hub, this dark blue line, this is what natural gas prices for the US look like. Up here, the light blue line is the Japan Korean, which is kind of the Asian benchmark for natural gas pricing. And the yellow line is the TTF, which is in the Dutch index, which is kind of the European index. And so you can see that, we average somewhere around $4 a decatherm or MMBTU of gas. And the international ones, at least currently, are ranging just a little bit below $10. We've seen them above $10 over the past years. They're coming down as we send more and more cheaper LNG out into the market. But we kind of have to meet folks at this price in order to get LNG cargoes to New England. And so that causes increased pricing for us here in New England because we have to buy these additional cargoes due to a lack of pipeline infrastructure. And so you can see over time, they're projecting that those costs are going to come down because we're sending so much more out. And so that may happen, but it is causing increased costs for folks in New England because we have to buy that global liquefied natural gas and we're having less domestically, which is pushing the price of a molecule through the US pipelines up on the other side of things. Another piece that I mentioned earlier is this day-ahead ancillary services market. And so this market, basically why it was implemented is we had an older market structure that was similar, but we were finding that there were a lot of days where we would procure what we thought we needed for that day, and then we would end up needing more. And so that market was usually done on like a month or so ahead of time. And obviously, in a month, weather predictions can change wildly, other factors can change wildly. And so, what ISO New England decided to do was change the market to be a day ahead market so that we could look to the next day. We'd have a lot more information about what's the weather, what do we think the generation needs are going to be, all of those things, and take that into account for a better forecast. And changing this market to a day ahead would help us meet that better. And we've seen definitely some, better reliability on the grid, especially, we had all these events the past couple of weeks when we've had all these storms and it's been deeply cold. That has been good. The issue is the cost of this market. In their filing with FERC, the ISO said that they expected this market to cost about $140 million a year, or roughly a 1.4% increase on people's bills. No one wants to pay higher bills, but if it means for better reliability for the region so that we don't have to have brownouts and blackouts like we see in California and Texas and other regions of the country, maybe a reasonable trade-off. The issue is it's been so expensive. So over here is a table looking at, since its inception in March 2025 through the end of 2025, what the cost of this market was. And right here, you can see that it has cost over $630 million versus this $140 million that we predicted. So significantly more expensive. Since then, it's been even more expensive. The month of January cost an additional about $450 million. And that last week of January, when we had the deep cold after the storm, alone cost about $350 million. So almost 3 times what they predicted in 1 week of the year. And so that has been adding some significant costs to bills that we've seen for end users. We at Power Options are doing a lot of advocacy for all of our members on that behalf. I myself represent Power Options at stakeholder meetings with the ISO, and we've written a couple of letters to them urging them to do something. I've shared in some forums that we're seeing significantly increased costs for our members, and this is unreasonable, etc. So we are doing really all that we can to try and help make these costs lower. I'm starting to make some progress. Hopefully some progress really in the market at large will be done soon. Fingers crossed there. But this is really becoming a large cost that was unforeseen about a year ago. And so we're trying to address that to make these costs less significant while keeping sort of the reliability piece of it intact. And so taking all of those things into account, this is a lot to think about. There's a lot of factors that are influencing the market. What can you do to help mitigate the risk and shore up costs and not have to think about this so much? And so there's a couple things. So what we recommend is creating a structured purchasing strategy to help minimize your risk and avoid market volatility. And so the 2 main ways you can go, or there are really 3 main ways to go about doing that. 1, you can just buy all of your energy at one point in time for the next couple of years. You can do that, but that means that you're at the mercy of whatever the price was that day. And so if that ended up being a good price or a bad price, that is the price that you have. What we'd really recommend doing is this structured purchasing strategy. And so that either uses one of 2 things. Timed buys, meaning you make buys at set periods of time or intervals of time, or make buys based on price goals. We sometimes see these referred to as strike prices if you've heard them, with some flexibility. An example of that would be 25% of your volumes, you buy the NYMEX cost of it each quarter of the year before you use it. So for example, if we're right now in 2026, you could break up your natural gas costs into 25% chunks. This quarter by 25%, next quarter by 25%, third quarter, fourth quarter, do the same thing for next year. And that way you kind of average out the highs and the lows in the market to get one price that it has all of that mixed in. That way you're not beholden to whatever the price was on a single day and can kind of help average that over time. Creating one of these successful purchasing strategies, it helps you get ahead of some of this volatility or decrease some of the volatility if you're in the middle of it. Usually what we see with these is, you have a goal to buy during the quarter, but you will still try and look out for when lower pricing is approximately during each quarter. So what that usually works out to is you buy at kind of the middle of the market or on the lower side of the market, and that usually works out pretty well. The thing that I really want to caution is don't ever try and always just hold everything to the lowest price in the market. Doing that is basically like playing the stock market, and there are very few people who are successful at that, and it is very hard to do, and it usually doesn't work out very well. And so by doing a strategy like this, you can help avoid just betting everything on one day of one year for the next couple of years for you. And so getting into that a little more, the fixed contract, like I said, it gives you the most budget certainty ahead of time, but doesn't necessarily decrease your costs. This layered or managed strategy helps minimize the cost for you while still providing certainty, because you are still locking it in before the date you need it. It's just not on one day, it's over a few days over time. In order to do this, what you want to do is you want to make long-term, what we call base contract purchases. So if you remember to the first couple of slides I showed you there, when we saw for energy, or electricity, there's the non-energy and energy component. And for natural gas, there's the basis and the NYMEX component. If you lock in that non-energy component for electricity and that basis component for natural gas, that gives you the flexibility to make these buys over time. And so that's what we really recommend doing, and doing that out for a couple of years. And so to make sure that you are structured and still have a good plan in place to have certainty, what we recommend doing is, setting a deadline to have the pricing locked in ahead of the usage. If the example that I just gave a moment ago, where you do it every quarter of the year ahead of time, feels a little too close to that year, or you want to budget a little better and you want to do it a year or two in advance, you can do that too. Set whatever makes sense for you. We'd also recommend setting buys generally during advantageous times. The spring and the fall, especially the spring, are usually when we see pricing depressed the most. And so those are really good times to buy. And then on top of that, look for dips in the market due to abnormalities. We have a warm winter. We have a lot of natural gas in storage. If a lot of these liquefied natural gas plants suddenly go down because they have to do maintenance or something happened with a storm in the Gulf, those are times that you can make buys on top of sort of a structured strategy to help take advantage of the market. So if you work all of those things together, you can get a really good product where you are still giving yourself budget certainty, but helping decrease that cost over time. It takes a little bit more effort, really not that much. Again, we are here to help you and can help do that for you. But it really helps decrease the cost over time and doesn't put your eggs all in one basket of one day. And so at this point, I want to turn it over to Rita to talk a little bit about how the REAP program and Power Options as an organization can help you reduce your costs.
Yeah, and I just want to maybe pause and see, you had a lot of great information, Zach. And Phil, Ed, I know you've got your pricing locked in and did it at a good time, so that's all good. And Lauren, welcome. I just wanted to see whether or not you had any questions that you had for Zach. Okay. Well, moving forward, this is
Sorry,
I just want to kind of.
I
Oh,
couldn't
sorry.
find my the Zoom window was like buried. I couldn't find it. But I don't have any questions. Sorry. It's just obviously a lot of pressure on energy prices, and that's unfortunate. But I was always curious about the proposal. I wasn't sure if it was included in that slide. Maybe it was about the budget, but governor's budget that would um, increase or reduce the benefit of these net metering agreements, power PPAs that we have. I know we came up at a league meeting, and it sounded like there's going to be a lot of pushback against that because we have a lot of these contracts in place, and the savings for a typical ratepayer, residential ratepayer, is something like $1 a month or something. I don't know if that was underestimating the savings, but if it's like $1 per month and it's hurting all of our budgets, it seems like a bad deal. So I was just wondering whether that's still in the like, what's the status of that?
I could maybe just jump on that real quick. Zach, if anybody else has anything they want to add, but what I was told and what I've found out is that particular section of the article has been pulled from the governor's budget, and they are working on addressing those very issues you just brought up, which are not advantageous to cities and towns. I think the word got out pretty well that it was not the best possible way forward. So as of today, and I think this week because of the snowstorm, there was going to be a House meeting on finance regarding that particular issue. They pulled that out of the budget hearing from House Finance. So they are not dealing with that. They are setting up a separate work group to work on that issue, and I feel comfortable that municipalities have been listened to. We're not the only ones who are in opposition. I think there are hospitals, there are schools, there's quite a bit involved in this. So stay tuned. We'll certainly keep you posted. But as of right now, I think the governor's office and the governor's budget, as well as both the House and Senate, realize the implications of that particular section in the article, and they're not moving forward with that. Other items that Zach had mentioned are moving forward. We'll have more information on it as it unfolds, and we'll certainly roll it out to municipalities. But the biggest issue in that was the net metering, and that's being tabled right now. So that's what I have to offer. I don't know if anybody else has anything else they'd like to put out there, but as of right now, everything's in a holding pattern for that, and I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that did not go unnoticed.
Makes it
So
it would hurt
yeah,
future agreements too, because you can be
100%.
concerned that you're going to lose your shirt down the road. Because I know the change in laws included in those agreements, because they're not going to eat that cost.
100%.
We're going to eat the cost. So yeah, that's good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, CJ.
Great. Awesome. Well, taking a little bit of a shift. So glad that you had that opportunity to ask that question. Moving forward, just to kind of do a brief highlight on how the REAP program can help. Maybe Zach, if you can go to the next screen. These are just from a high level. Hopefully you all are already aware of this, but through the REAP program, you have access to the competitive procurement that both the REAP program and Power Options does on behalf of our members. And we do that not only for commodity, but for a whole wide variety of other services that I'll get into in a little bit more detail. The other thing that you have through the Rhode Island League's REAP program is access to an expert like Zach and all the information that he just went through on what's going on in the market, et cetera. But you also have a dedicated member manager such as myself, so that if you ever have any questions about energy, you can just pick up the phone, give me a call, and if I don't have the answers, I'm able to go back and work with the Power Options team to see if we can answer the question. The other things that we do, we have a monthly newsletter that we send out. Hopefully you're receiving that, and that gives you kind of a high level view of what's going on in the energy market. And we actually now also have a report that goes out specifically around what's going on in the regulatory environment. That's called the RAPS report. So, and again, part of what we do is the expertise around the market, but it's also keeping keeping our eyes on what's happening from a federal and local regulatory perspective so that we can be advocates on behalf of our members. The other thing that you have available is the Energy Intelligence Suite, which helps you to actually, it's a sort of an AI sort of system that can actually, in essence, monitor your energy data for you. So if there's any billing anomalies, that can be addressed. So, how can you respond to energy price increases? Maybe going forward to the next slide, Zach. In essence, I know most people are very familiar with energy procurement, and although it can sound confusing, especially when you're being hit with all kinds of phone calls from people who are trying to sell you something, um, you know, sometimes people are trying to give you a solution without really understanding what your specific needs are. And that's where the REAP program operates very differently. And Power Options is here as your energy team, really to help you navigate the confusion so that you can remain focused on your community's priorities. Power Options' sole focus is on government and nonprofits. And what we want to try to do is help your energy journey roll along smoothly, hence the wheel that we have here. Over half of our members are municipalities, and we bring 25 years worth of experience in working with municipalities. And the way we work is pretty straightforward. We handle competitive procurement on your behalf so that your team doesn't have to spend time and your resources with doing individual procurements. That is part and parcel of what we do and where our expertise is. And at the same time, we have over 850 members now. And that is a very attractive buying consortium. And that buying power allows us to do two things. Number one, it allows us to get very aggressive pricing so that suppliers have very low margins. But it also allows us to get better contract terms for our members that protect them and that you would not be able to secure on your own. And we do that for all of our programs. You're probably most familiar with it because of what we do for the commodity, electricity and natural gas. But we also do it for our solar program and other offerings that we have available to members. And really, right now, one of the key things is we do the procurement on behalf of of the consortium, but then our members, as you know, through your experience with us, is we monitor the market and we try to find those advantageous times to lock in so that you have budget certainty. And we try to keep the process as simple and as manageable as possible. Again, we're here. We really see ourselves as being a key part of your team. But the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns REAP program can help you more holistically. We support your, well, basically, the first thing that we need to know is what are your community's needs? And everyone needs electricity, and having that budget certainty for your supply is, kind of step one. But then we look at, are there ways that you can actually reduce how much energy that you're using in your buildings? So that's the next step is, sort of looking at building decarbonization. And what that really means is helping you to reduce the amount of energy that you use in your building, whether that's putting in LED lighting with controls or looking at replacing your heating system because it's at the end of its useful life and you may want to transition from oil to electric or, et cetera. So we try to come up with solutions that are going to fit your goals and your budget. And we've worked closely with members already. We have the experience of moving these projects forward based on your priorities. If the heating system is something that you want to transition to a different energy source, we take advantage of all the rebates and incentives, both from the state, within Rhode Island, but also at the federal level. And we have alternative financing mechanisms that we can bring to the table as well. Again, it's important for us to listen to you and what your needs are so that we can tailor things appropriately. So sort of once you've sort of squeezed down the amount of energy that's being used in your building, the next logical part of the conversation that generally occurs is looking at solar. And on-site solar can be a great option to actually make the electricity that you need on site. And we have a competitively procured program that it enables our members to take advantage of that. And I know we're coming up on time, Jen. I want to just make sure that I just want to take a pause there and make sure that it's okay to keep moving.
Yeah, we will probably need to end since we started a couple minutes late. Maybe if we can end by like 11:02-ish.
Okay, very good. So revisiting here, we've helped our members with over 100 megawatts worth of solar, on-site solar. And we've been doing that since 2010. And we have about a megawatt worth of solar that's currently under consideration down in Rhode Island. And the vendor that won our procurement actually has been safe harboring solar panels so that not only can you take advantage of what incentives are available locally and at the state level, but also the federal energy credits are also are still available and need to be safe harbored by this summer in order for you to be able to make those installations cost effective. So if you'd like to see what solar opportunities look like and what the financial benefits of that would be, please, let me know sooner rather than later so that we can see if we can develop a plan and look at whether or not that plan and the costs and the benefits fit for your community. And just as an aside, if solar isn't practical for you to do on site, we also are monitoring net metering credits, as Phil, you'd alluded to earlier. We are in the market currently looking at what is available. And at one point, a couple of years ago, we actually found net metering credits for Rhode Island League of City and Town members that gave them a dollar's worth of credit for 65 cents. So those credits, that is what we do. We're driven by finding the best deals for our members so that they can take control of what you can. And then, just just touching on these very briefly, when it comes to looking at electrifying your fleets, et cetera, we can help with the planning. We can help with the electric vehicle charging stations. There's a new model that we're bringing to the table, which is a vendor-owned and operated model that allows others to own and operate the system so that you don't have to be the gas station for your town, that others would manage that to enable electric vehicles, et cetera. And the last piece that I'll touch on is, energy data and budget and reporting. I alluded to the Energy Intelligence Suite. It's an automated system that can be tailored to automatically let you know if there's billing anomalies. And you can actually pilot up to 10 accounts as a REAP member. And some folks have elected to actually expand that beyond to include all accounts. And that system can be leveraged to help you with monitoring your energy budgets, et cetera, so that you can make informed decisions. So I'm here. I know this is a lot of information, but we're really here, to be a trusted partner and to guide you through the process. So all the way from identifying projects to the end of seeing measurable impacts. So with that, Jen, I'll pass it back to you.
Sure. Thank you, Rita and Zach and Kristen, for all this super interesting information. And it's a lot to take in. I'm sure. Well, let me just open it, see if there's other questions from our colleagues here.
Jen, I don't really have a question, but I just wanted to agree with you. Thank you to Power Options for being such a great partner. And Zach, that was a great presentation. There was an awful lot of quality information in there, especially with this year's legislation coming through, or this legislative year coming up with a lot of energy bills. So I look forward to working with you all, as well as Jonathan, as we go forward, to keep an eye on all legislation to make sure we're proactive when it comes to its effect on municipalities. But thank you all, and thank you, Jen, for putting this together.
Thanks for the invite. Glad that you had that basically one-on-one session plus for the town. So it's great. Seems like people were missing out. I mean, come on, it's good information.
Right.
Yeah, we're here for you. We're going to be at the annual convention and would love to see you there next month. We'll be presenting. Please stop by that, where we'll kind of go in deeper and do some case study work with the city of Providence, and they'll also be doing an update on where things are with the state. So plenty more to come in that. But also just a couple things to flag for you. We do have some solar panels safe harbored. So if solar is of interest to you, there's still time to get in before the federal tax credits end. So please let us know, like, in the next week or so, as soon as possible, so that we can try to get you as much savings as we possibly can on solar. And
do you need just like a verbal, yes, we're working on something, or?
Yeah, you'll need to start engaging with our solar provider, Select. And so if it's something that you might be interested in, Rita is your member manager and can help make those connections.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And then the other thing, if you have not already, for those of you who are on the call and who are coming up, might hear this later, Rita is your member manager for all 39 cities and towns. And I really would encourage you to set a time with her to kind of have this comprehensive conversation about what are your energy needs, where are you struggling, where are you looking to save, what goals do you have in your local municipality, and how we can best support you. Because to take advantage of everything that you're seeing here on this screen, we really want to make sure that you can take advantage of that. So we're really here for you, and just don't hesitate to reach out. And really, really good luck with managing all that snow that you have piled up in your communities.
I just realized Jamestown is here too, so.
Yes, I know, both of you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to downplay that, but glad to have this all this great information. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well,
Absolutely. Well, thanks for attending. I would just ask Zach, if you could, if the slides are shareable, if you could send those to me. Would love to have those. And I will have this video up on our YouTube channel and shared out later on this afternoon with all of our members who are probably out shoveling right now.
That's the thing. Exactly.
All right. Well, thanks
Thank you
again.
all.
And yes, we will see you all at the convention, and I'm sure we'll be in touch very shortly with the slides. Thanks so much.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, CJ. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Bye.